All right,
We
cool.
are live.
We are live. This is a special edition of our 5D Warrior podcast, welcoming Christian Van Camp, CVC Wellness. Great, we finally got to connect. We've been trying to for a while. It's been months in the making, right? But yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts on all things holistic health, consciousness, your spiritual practices, and just like what you do to keep a healthy mind and body.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we can unpack today. And it's like it all starts with the mind. You know, that's the crazy part about it. All of our actions start with our thoughts, and then we can transcribe them into actual movements or, you know, reactions, actions, which totally play a big role, not only in our lives, but the greater good, the whole trajectory of everyone around us.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For sure, for sure. Do you what do you have to talk about I see all your gut health, all your health stuff on your Instagram, all great content. Can you give us a little background on like just like how to optimize your health lifestyle?
Yeah, you bring up the gut health. Let's start with that for sure. So
Wanted
I'm
to
really
gut
I'm
health.
really big on the idea of like mindset, gut, and muscle. I say it all the time, like these three pillars, because if we can prioritize those three and just break it down in simplicity, it's more likely that we'll adhere to them. So mindset we'll start off with, you know, and that connects directly to that highway we have with our gut. It's a 2-lane highway. And so if our gut health is having issues, we're going to start having brain fog and issues with our brain as well. If our brain's having issues, we're having emotional turmoil, we're having poor relationships, we're getting in fights all the time, we're just having self-sabotaging thoughts, all that kind of stuff. That causes issues with our gut as well. So it's like the stress in our mind creates stress in our gut. So, and vice versa. So it's really complex, but it's also very simple. You know, simply getting the gut healthy with nourishing foods, you know, and feeding those gut bacteria. We have over 100 trillion microbes in our gut right now that we can feed either good things or bad things. And it's, you know, it's kind of a balancing act. And so I'm really big on the 80-20 rule. So comprise 80% of your diet with whole, organic, you know, sustainable foods that will really nourish that gut bacteria. We can go into some examples later on. And then that 20%, maybe 10%, you can start throwing in some of those fun foods that you enjoy, like the cake and whatnot, right? That's a very sustainable way to go about it. That's how I like to look at it. And a lot of my clients I work with on that idea too, is the 80-20 rule. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, it starts with the mind. Get your mindset right. Like, what are your goals? Establish, like, what is your vision you want for your life, your core values, your purpose on this planet? Ask those questions. Get a little philosophical, kind of like this platform right here. We're really big on the consciousness level, right? So if you can tap into that mind's eye a little bit more and connect that to some of your goals for your health and your lifestyle, it'll make it a lot easier to get healthier in your lifestyle. And so start with that, establish those foundations, and then move forward with, you know, some of the actions for your health, such as your gut health, eating healthier food. That's a big foundation and pillar to our life. And then we have the muscle I brought up as the other pillar, right? And that's related to consistent movement throughout the day, right? Instead of lounging around sitting on our chairs all day long, which is a habit I catch myself in at times too, where I'm like 2+ hours sitting down on my laptop working on things. I'm like, holy shit, I'm getting stagnant here. My energy in the head's getting stagnant too. So it's important to move consistently, like throughout the day, like our ancestors, right? They were not plopped down under fluorescent lights all day long. We were consistently moving, enjoying all the different kind of lunging and steep squats, all that stuff. So take advantage of that, you know, and then with the muscle as well, just get a weightlifting regimen in or something along those lines that you can really activate those muscle fibers. And that makes a big difference on your gut and mind as well. So everything's kind of interconnected.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. And when you talk about like getting your mind right, like how are you doing that throughout the day, getting your mind right? Is it meditation, journaling? And then also on the movement perspective, we see that you post like you say you work out 3 times a week, which is something that kind of seems abstract to a lot of people that are like gym rats all the time. Like, how do you stay moving but also only work out 3 times a week? Like, what practices do you do to kind of keep the river flowing, the blood moving in your body?
Yeah, great question. So for the movement perspective, I'd say just like simply, you know, Qigong is one of my favorite things in the world. It's helped me a lot just with overall getting that breath tied into the body. And then once you get that, you can kind of, it's like a meditative, you know, movement practice. If you guys aren't aware of Qigong, it's basically like energy movement in a sense. And it's ancient. I mean, it's been around for thousands and thousands of years, from traditional Chinese medicine and originated in China. And It helps me a lot. So I do a lot of Qigong. I think that helps me with working in energy versus expelling or working out energy with lifting 3 days a week. Now, going off of that, I think a lot of guys nowadays are stagnant. We're at our desks, we're working hard, but we're not moving our bodies. And then we hit these hard ass workouts, squats and all this shit for an hour after being stagnant all day long, sitting down on our tush, right? That is the most unhealthy thing you can do, because your body's in this kind of fight or flight mode while you're stationary. And then you put this fight or flight mode for an hour that's really intense that your body wasn't even ready for, because your heart rate's been kind of low all day and you aren't getting that consistent movement in. So the worst thing you can ever do is be stagnant throughout the week at your desk job or whatever, and then just bust your butt for an hour 4+ times a week. I think that's a recipe for disaster. It's basically going to set up your adrenals. It's going to burn them out, and you're just going to be overwhelmed a lot. You're going to be feeling uneasy, maybe anxiety might erupt, things like that will erupt, right? Sleep issues. So instead, I'm a really big proponent of these 3 days a week. I think if we can prioritize for the bulk of our overall health, that consistent movement, that consistent activity throughout the day, like our primal ancestors, all the things I mentioned, like lunging, squatting, just simple movements throughout the day you can throw in there, just stretching briefly, even yoga-esque movements, and then put that hour-long hard workout, similar to maybe a push-pull legs kind of routine 3 days a week, and focus on strength gains, focus on those compound lifts, and you're going to see results with your physique and also the mindset and the energy.
So do you practice that like Qigong like every day you're not at the gym? Or do you still do it on the days you go to the gym?
I'd say it's like a daily practice now, actually. It's gotten to the point where I love to wake up, and the first thing I do is actually get outside, get some sunlight on my body as much as possible. And then I start, grounding myself barefoot in the earth, and I just do some Qigong movements there. And I usually spend to anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes doing that on a daily basis. Part of my morning routine now, but yeah, I mean, even on off days, that's a good priority. It's a good way to kind of get that energy in after you've expelled so much and kind of tore up your muscles for those 3 days a week.
Do you follow any specific regimen with the Qigong? Because I know I've been doing Qigong now for about the last year, not every
Awesome.
day. For the last probably about a month or so, I've probably been almost every day. But I've been looking into like the Shibashi Qigong and then the brocades were like the main ones I looked at. And then I've seen a bunch of Troy's stuff with him and his different movements. Do you follow a regimen, or do you kind of just do like what you feel in the moment?
I actually am interested in following more of a regimen, to be honest, now that you say that, Corey. But right now it's kind of just like whatever feels right in the moment. Like if I want to get more of the horse squat poses, I'll do some of those, different variations of such that I'm not too familiar on the exact names of them, but I'm very familiar on certain the movements that bring in a lot more clarity in my life. So it's kind of, I'm a very sporadic personality in general. I'm a Gemini and all that stuff. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram. I'm a type 7 for the most part. So I love bouncing around and changing things up. And so for me, it's kind of like whatever's in the moment feels good.
Yeah, so based on all this stuff and the conscious lifestyle that you live, like was there like a turning point in your life where like all of a sudden like something happened and like you decided to change your lifestyle to lead a more conscious life, or were you always like living a conscious lifestyle?
I'd say after high school, I got done with a lot of sports like track and field, soccer. I used to do sprinting, the 400-meter dash and all that stuff. After that kind of faded, that's when my fitness journey began, because I was like real skinny all throughout high school. Went to community college and I started lifting weights right then and there. That got me into the fitness grind like right away when I was 18, 19. That opened me up to consciousness a little bit more, because I was starting to connect more into my body. And also there's a big turning point. My little sister Nina had a heart transplant back in March of 2014. So about 8 years ago. And she was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which is basically an underdeveloped left side of her heart, where it's basically a 3-chambered heart. So instead of having the 4 chambers we have, where blood flow comes in from the right side in the right atrium, goes into the ventricle, gets pumped through the lungs, get oxygenated, comes back in through the left side of the heart, and then gets pumped throughout the body. She didn't have a developed left side of her heart ventricle. So basically blood would come in and it would immediately start being dispersed throughout the body. And so her heart was very weak. It was filled with like these micro holes. Throughout her whole life, she had this issue. Until 2014, that's when a big turnaround happened, where she was administered into the hospital actually 2013 of Christmas Day. She was administered in the hospital for 3 months. So my family, we were always visiting her. This is when I'm about a sophomore in high school. She is about 2-3 years younger than me. And so as you can imagine, she's really young in like 8th grade. And, she was at a point where the doctor said she was going to pass away. And, after like 2 weeks, we found out that someone had passed away, unfortunately, but fortunately to give her that heart and keep her alive on this planet. So she received a new heart, and it's a blessing from God, in many ways. And so she wouldn't be here if it weren't for Western medicine, if it weren't for the medicine we have today. However, this also brought me to the world of ancestral Eastern philosophy and the healing that comes with that, the natural healing. So I have this big respect for Western medicine and how we do have we have abrupt issues that arrive. Like, let's say you broke your arm, you would go to the hospital, you could easily get that patched up and fixed up, right? But nowadays we're just handing out medications like it's nothing for anxiety, like Adderall, all this stuff, right? That's where I see an issue. So I understand both sides of the coin. Nina wouldn't be at where she's at now with her health if it weren't for a lot of the natural healing modalities she utilized. If it weren't for my research into that realm, she inspired me so much to tap into natural healing, because I understood that I have no excuse for where I'm at right now. I wasn't born with a heart abnormality. I didn't have any severe issues throughout my life with my health. Nina did. And so I was like, I have no fucking excuse. It's time to put in the work and optimize myself as much as possible. So at that turning point, sophomore, junior year, I started getting interested in more health stuff, more natural healing, tapped into it, started listening to a ton of podcasts, reading books. And then, like I said, that turning point in high school, started lifting weights a ton, explored different supplements, and listened to, great leaders like Ben Greenfield, Paul Chek, all those names like that started coming up in my horizon. And literally that became my subconscious downloads, is just listening to hours of podcasts on a daily basis. Those words of these terrific human beings with these inspirational health and fitness-based concepts started implanting into my subconscious. So they became my words. And so now, 6 years of doing that, it's like implanted into my essence. And so that's kind of, a roundabout to what exactly happened in my life with my trajectory down this area.
So you just brought up Paul Chek. I know we've done a couple podcasts with Eric, and he said he studied at the Paul Chek Institute. Did you also as well?
Yes, absolutely. I love the programs he has. They're profound and really established that holistic approach that I'm very big on now, because I've worked with personal training. I had a client today and we're doing personal training. Now they come in, they're fatigued, they're tired, they aren't hitting the workouts hard. We're not progressing in these lifts. They're not getting stronger. They're not getting muscle. Why? Because their lifestyle, 95% of the time outside of the workout, is shit, unfortunately. And so they're not going to excel in these areas. So that inspired me over time too, being a personal trainer. Like, hey, these people aren't progressing because their sleep is still trash, their bad habits, alcohol, poor food, all that stuff is leading to them not progressing. Sorry, I got Alexa in the background. She's listening, guys. But it's wild. That's kind of the thing too, is that holistic lifestyle approach,
Yeah, for sure. And we got on the holistic stuff. We're not fully embraced in the holistic, at least myself, not yet at least, but we wanted to talk to you to get a better concept of it, because we're more tuned into the consciousness aspect of it, the mind, but I'm not totally in tune with my body yet. So that's why we're so grateful to have you on, so you can give us some more knowledge about the body too.
And what was your first step when you really started doing all this stuff? I know you said you were working out and stuff, but what was what did you start doing that made it a spiritual practice and a conscious discipline, rather than just okay, I'm going to get big, I'm going to get strong? Because I know that's how I always was playing football. It's oh, I just want to put up 315 on a bench press, or pick up 400 pounds, whatever it is. It's where did your mindset shift from just the fitness perspective to the spiritual?
It's funny. It almost was like a big huzzah, all at once. And it wasn't necessarily kind of a step-by-step for me.
Yeah.
It was kind of it kind of all trickled into my life simultaneously. But in many ways, yes, it started with the physical body. That's where I primarily started. It's okay, how do I optimize my body? How do I start building muscle on my skinny, scrawny self, and that's when I started lifting weights and really prioritizing more so muscle building. So I was into a lot of kind of bodybuilding concepts and just working out hard 5 days a week, right? And then I started realizing as well that my body was getting tired from that, and I actually wasn't recovering well, because I had to force myself to eat a lot. My metabolism has always been very high, And so I would have to eat, a shit ton of calories and shit ton of protein and all that to really see the results. And so at a certain point, I realized, hey, 5 hour or 5 days a week also isn't working. Let's change it up. Let's see what 3 days a week is like with these heavy compound lifts, and then take those days to rest. That way I don't also have to eat so much food all the time. And that started working really well. So I shifted into that. But going off your question about integrating more spiritual sense stuff, I think there was that point where after community college, I went to the University of Arkansas to study nutrition. And that's when I started really tapping into the world of nutrition a lot more, and realizing that food is wisdom, and food is like able to really give us vitality for our cells. It's not just numbers, it's not just calories, it's not just macros, it's not all this stuff that we have been implanted in our brains due to our society be so entrenched in that, right? All these labels like low calorie and all this stuff, it brainwashes us in many ways. So I started shifting to food a lot more, which brought me into spirituality as well, because I started realizing like, hey, this is really spiritual. What we put in our bodies really creates ourselves and who we are. And so if I'm putting, unfortunately, like, potato chips every day in my body, it's not going to be the best for this technology I have within me that I can use for the greater good. And so that's when everything started, really just boom, like all at once, like the spiritual sense, the nutrition, the fitness, all that came together.
Mhm. So you were talking about the Eastern philosophy. Now, what type of like specific Eastern philosophy do you follow? Is it Hinduism, Buddhism? Have you looked into like the Tao and like those ideas of kind of like ever-present force or life force energy and that type of stuff?
Yeah. So I recently, over the past year, started getting into more Buddhism and more, especially Chinese kind of medicine and the situation with that. But I've always been really pulled towards Ayurveda and ancient Indian philosophies. And so like everything with the Sanskrit and Ayurveda being over 5,000 year old, basically medical system in a sense of how to live your life. It's basically a health system. It's really profound. There's so many endless areas of it that you could really study your entire life and never get the full cake, right? You're always just getting pieces of it. And so for me, I really am, I have so much admiration for Ayurveda. And so, with the doshas, the whole idea of vata, which tends to be more of the skinnier, airy type of people, right? They tend to have smaller frames in the physical sense, and they tend to be more anxious ridden type idea. That's a very brief understanding of vata. And then you got pitta, which is more of a mesomorph kind of person who's a lot more fiery. And that tends to be who I am now, where my metabolism's pretty high. I love hot food, but it's not the best for me. So cooling foods and cooling routines tend to be best for me. That's why I love ice baths, right? So that's more of the pitta. And then you got the kapha, which tends to be more of the bigger boned people. They tend to have wider shoulders. They're typically the CrossFitters. They're oilier. They tend to put on weight a little bit easier than most people, and have a little bit of digestive issues here and there. So it's interesting because you got the vata, pitta, kapha, which are the three different doshas, and it goes even deeper than that. That's just surface level stuff on Ayurveda. But I started getting attracted to that because that's like deep ancestral knowledge that we didn't need scientific microscopes and things to understand. We literally just needed like just intuition, like Mother Nature's intuition to know how to heal a body. So I always was so attracted to that after, my sister especially got healed from modern medicine.
Yeah, and that intuition comes with the gut health, right?
Oh yeah.
Gut,
Right. Yeah.
the intuition gets a lot better. But what would you, so like I see all the stuff you post with like your meals, and by the way, your meals always look like crazy good.
Delicious.
They look delicious.
Awesome.
Like what, so like if I was a person starting out on my health journey, like what would you suggest the foods I should be putting in my body?
This is a good one. So obviously, I'm going to start off by saying bio-individuality. Every human is different. So what I will mention here is not necessarily going to click with you. You're going to have to go back to the intuitive eating and is this really feeling good? Do I feel brain foggy? Do I feel like bloated after this? Or do I feel energized, clear-headed, and like this fiery digestion after I eat this, right? So ask those questions all the time. Intuitive eating, mindful eating, instinctual eating is super important. But for the basis of everything, I'd recommend, a higher fat, higher protein diet. I think most people do well with that. I think the reason being is because it keeps your metabolism higher. You aren't getting consistent insulin spikes, which is a major problem nowadays. And insulin is basically what helps bring blood glucose down from our bloodstream. And so if we're having blood glucose spikes all day long, we're going to be storing more fat. Insulin is, a lot of people call it a fat storing hormone. So that being said, a lower glycemic, anti-inflammatory diet loaded up in foods. We'll start off with carbs. Sweet potatoes, right? I'm a big fan of sweet potatoes. I eat those very often. Even certain ancient grains are good for most people, like quinoa. But this is where we start going into pressure cookers. I recommend everyone gets a pressure cooker because it can cook out a lot of plant chemicals that may not be suitable for your body and can cause inflammation. Lectins are a big one, which are found in beans. Although I'm a huge fan of beans, I eat beans all the time. I just made some pressure cooked beans the other day, and I do a lot of meal prep with that every week. So big fan of black beans. Just get a pressure cooker if you're going to eat them. Quinoa, like I mentioned, sweet potatoes. Those are some of my favorites right there. And then if you go into like more fats, just load up your diet and ghee, butter. And speaking of Ayurveda, ghee is an ancient. Are you guys familiar with ghee?
No.
I've heard of ghee, but I don't necessarily know exactly what it is.
So it's Ghee, and it's basically clarified butter. What does that mean? It basically was heated up at a lower temperature to where it separates from like butter was heated up at a lower temperature. It separates the milk solids from butter. So then you just are left with the nutrient dense stuff that doesn't have the milk solids in it. So it's pretty awesome because it's a little bit more nutrient dense than butter, which is great. And you can actually keep it out of the fridge and it won't go bad because it doesn't have those milk solids, which can go bad. So lower in lactose as well. So anyone that's concerned about dairy and stuff, ghee is a great option right there. And it tastes unique. It has this really unique kind of nutty taste to it.
Mm-hmm.
Huge fan of that. So grass-fed if you can, butter, ghee, coconut oil, olive oil, avocado, animal fats of such, it could be tallow, it could be things along those lines. Those are all wonderful fats to prioritize on a daily basis to help you out with your health and metabolism. And then on the contrary, cut out those vegetable oils, corn oil, safflower, sunflower. Look at labels, right? They're loaded up in everything, unfortunately. So we got to be very weary of that stuff because even just a teaspoon of that daily is going to cause some issues with their metabolism and fat gain and all the stuff we don't want. Brain fog, especially, right? So those are the fats. And last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about proteins. I'm a huge advocate of an omnivorous diet. I don't think I'll ever be dogmatic and say vegan is the way, carnivore is the way, or keto or any of that shit. I think it's listening to your body in the moment and like what feels good. Today, I've been prioritizing keto. It just felt right. I didn't have very many carbs. It's insane. Like you listen to your body, you get to a point where it feels right. I wasn't training today too, so I didn't really need the carb source in a sense. So some days I like to have more plant-based approach, right? Where I'm eating the majority of plants all day. And then at the end of the day, I'll have some grass-fed beef, or I'll have some sardines, or some wild-caught salmon. Those are some good protein sources right there. Eggs, pasture-raised eggs. But see, those are animal source. So if you are wanting to lean more in the plant-based vegan approach, then, you can do the pressure-cooked beans, pressure-cooked lentils, hemp seeds, pumpkin seeds. Those types of things are great.
I'm gonna put you on the spot real quick. If you had to choose one for the rest of your life, what are you going with?
I hate this question. I get this all the time. I've got this in like numerous podcasts. I'm like, you guys suck. Okay, if I had to choose one food or one what?
One like diet, you could say. Like
one diet. The flexitarian diet, where you're flexible.
That works.
Good answer. Good answer.
But if I were to say diet, like in all seriousness, I can't say either plant-based or carnivore. I just will never agree to either one full out. It just won't work in my heart. But I would say, cyclical keto is pretty cool. It's basically where you do keto on and off. And so you do break it with carbs, but you aren't always doing chronic keto, high fat, high protein. You're actually throwing in some carbs to break the ketones and all that every once in a while. So maybe it's once a week. You'll do like 5 days of complete keto, and then you'll have on the weekends, you'll have your sweet potatoes and such for a meal. And that's a great way to go about it too, for longevity and such. From what I hear, it sounds like it works pretty well. So some kind of cyclical keto sounds good.
Do you do like meal prepping for every week? Do you plan out like your whole week essentially of meals and like write out a meal plan for yourself and that sort of deal?
Man, kind of, like going back to the intuitive approach, I'm very intuitive, but for the most part with meal prepping, it's primarily done through carbohydrate sources, just because I
Okay.
love to train. So like I mentioned, the black bean kind of thing I like to do. So I get the pressure cooker, load up a ton of black beans. I put some sweet potatoes diced up in there. I'll load up ginger, turmeric, any sort of things like cauliflower, even herbs and spices, and just have fun. Garlic even, right? And just load up whatever I can in there. And that's kind of like throughout the week, I just have anywhere from half a cup to a cup a day of that, right? And that seems to keep me and my bowels happy. And that seems to be a good source for my carbs and meal prep for the most part. Otherwise, like yesterday, I cooked up 2 pounds of beef liver. So that I guess that's meal prep. So I'll be having about a half a pound every day for the next 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
Now, liver is a pretty big topic in social media right now.
Right.
With the you already know what I'm about to say.
I had liver before all this craziness, which is
know,
funny, but
like, what would
not
you
to be that guy who's boasting and bragging like I knew that song before everyone else, before it blew up. Like I'm not that guy,
but yeah, like would you say that's like when you eat it, do you feel like energized, like 100%?
dude,
Because
it's
I want to
crazy.
get into it.
I had some
trying to
liver
get my
earlier
mom to
today.
buy it. Like I'm like, Mom, like buy me some raw liver, and she's like, I'm not buying you that shit. Like, and I'm like, Mom, like I'm about to go buy it myself. But like,
Yeah, I hear that, dude. You can there's a lot of places you can get it online too, like not Belcampo anymore. Belcampo, I've heard bad things about it now, but Butcher Box is good. Some good efficacious meat kind of sellers are out there, but different farms they connect to with sustainable farms and such. But I mean, I found some good deals of grass-fed beef liver even at Whole Foods. So here and there, you'll catch a good batch of stuff. It's frozen, so it's not the best when you thaw it and then cook it up. I like to cook it personally. I mean, I just like to make it more of a meal and enjoyable. It doesn't really cook any nutrients out of it. So this whole fanatic stuff going on about people being like, have a bunch of raw, like eat raw, you're not a man. It's like, what the fuck is this? Like, let's just enjoy the meat itself. Like for me, I'd rather. I had a client. Hopefully, he doesn't hear this. He ended up having raw beef liver. Not something I wanted him to do, but he started eating it pretty consistently, and he must have left it out longer than it should have been in the fridge. And then he had it, and a couple days later, he got a bacterial infection. So he had to take an antibiotic and all this. It was pretty serious, right? He was like pooping his brains out, brain fog, unbelievable stuff when you get a bacterial infection like that from raw meat. So unless you're getting it like Liver King or Paul Saladino, the Carnivore MD, they're getting it from sources where it's like butchered and then it's right on their doorstep type stuff, right? They are not getting it from like transportation and all this stuff, frozen and unfrozen. That leads to some sketchiness. So personally, I wouldn't recommend eating raw. Go for it, try it out. I've done it before. I feel great eating it raw too, but I find that I might as well cook it to keep it safe. So I eat it pretty regularly. I eat like maybe a pound a week.
yeah, because that's the thing. I've been like looking around for it, but like I'm not just gonna go walk into the shop, right, and like buy whatever random liver they got there. Because like I feel like that would be more detrimental than just like not eating it. Like
Yeah, it's possible, man. I would say just try to opt for grass fed as best as possible, because I mean, even just going off of meat in its totality, if we're getting corn fed, soybean fed, all that stuff where they're just chronically eating these grains, these cows are getting extremely inflamed because that's not a part of their ancestral eating as well. So their guts are just getting blown up with all this. And then we have to inject them with antibiotics to counteract the inflammation, the histamine response in their bodies. It'd be like Corey, I'm going to tell you to eat all that grass in your backyard right now for the rest of your life. You're going to not feel so good, right? You're going to start pooping your brains out, probably having some rashes, all sorts of weird stuff, right? That's what these cows are being fed, sparingly. Some corn and some soybean and stuff probably is okay. But if you're just giving it to them chronically and that's all they're feeding on, it just isn't right. It's fucked up. It really is. The whole thing with factory farming is really sad. And so, the energy is transformed into that flesh. And so when you're eating factory farm meat, you're eating some depleted energy, right? And so
that principle of like everything, all the light energy from the sun is like just gives that life to the planet. You're basically just taking that in from whatever you're eating. When you're eating foods that are more high and light, like fruits or like dense meats and stuff like that, you just overall feel better, more energized. Like I feel like it's just a pure form of energy that you're consuming in itself.
I love that. Yeah. See, like I brought up kind of like the science part of it, and then you brought up that esoteric twist, and that is so important to acknowledge. Is like we really got to acknowledge the spirituality integrated into it. You know, you are what you ate, right? You aren't just you aren't what you just ate. You are what you ate. So like what your animal you're eating also ate something. So make sure you remember that you're also eating soybeans if your cow ate soybeans, right? And so yeah, it's important because I think it's sacred to eat meat in many ways and give it that love and intention. And that goes back to intuitive eating as well. If we're like thinking negatively about our food and we're about to consume it, like, oh, I shouldn't eat this cupcake, I know this is shit for my body. Well, you're kind of sending that signal to your body as you're eating that, and that's actually going to do more harm to your body than it is if you thought, I'm eating this cupcake because I freaking deserve it, and this cupcake's going to taste good and it's going to nourish my body. So if you transform it into that positivity, it more likely will make you feel good afterwards, right? The power of energetics with food is crazy.
That's the same thing. Like I'm drinking water right now, and I don't know if you've ever seen those like tests, but like at the electromagnetic level of like when they freeze the water, when people like curse at the water or like yell at the water like negative,
Oh, wow.
the vibrational like makeup of the water is like much more,
It's like chaotic
versus if you're like thank you water or I love you water, like stuff like that, and it's like more nutrient to your body in a sense.
Same way like no
100%.
snowflake is the same, where like each individual snowflake is different in that sacred shape that they have. And the same way that the molecules freeze in there. Oh, we were talking about light. I have to ask you a question about what do you think about the whole sunning your balls thing?
Well, of course, you know, I love that. Dude, it's amazing. It really is. I mean, I don't even have to tell you guys it. Just like, you know, I know you guys have probably tried it before. Have you guys tried it? Yeah, I was about to say, like, of course.
Those boy balls.
I spent an hour in the sun today naked. So I'm gonna be honest, it feels amazing. Like I do it almost daily. I do whenever I get a chance and I can just like have, you know, security around my property and stuff, and I don't feel insecure about just whipping them out. Like it's amazing. It really, I feel like calmer. I feel more energy. I feel like there is this sense of like masculine drive that comes afterwards. Like it's almost like this ambition, which may be corresponding to the testosterone boost that comes with it. Boosts nitric oxide, so more skin exposed will boost that blood flow. So overall, like I'm a huge fan of sunning your balls, and it became kind of like a joke for a little bit for a while, and I was like, that's kind of funny, like a couple of years ago, and then it actually got a lot of momentum, and I find it's very legit. I mean, even though they don't have like countless studies on PubMed, if you search like sunning your balls testosterone, it's very unlikely you'll see anything very apparent or efficacious. But there is an old study from many years ago that did show that you know, exposing your chest and back to the sun for 30 minutes, all the UV frequencies, you have an up leveling of around 200% or 150% of a testosterone, which is awesome. And then you add the balls in the equation and you got like a 200+% increase. So almost double your testosterone in a matter of 30 minutes exposing your balls. So it's pretty wild to see the big significance in just exposing more sunlight.
Yeah, and it goes back to like that ancestral living. Like that's what our ancestors would be doing. Like they'd be before we had clothes, like they'd be walking around all day in the sun naked. Like so we're that by practicing that, like we're going back to that ancestral roots, and like we're at our most pure form of beingness when we're like doing that shit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think about just like the planes, they wouldn't be like, cover that up. Like they'd be like, hey, expose that, you know, like to have a good time. But yeah, everything lately, I just like think I always go back to our ancestors. Like, is this something they would do? You know, would they sit in this position? Would they, you know, spend this much time doing this? And it's like a lot of times in our normal culture, it's quite the opposite. So I think that awareness is so important, and it can be very life-changing.
What do you do for meditation? Do you do any sort of binaural beats or visualizations or any sort of poses, mantras, that type of stuff when you're doing your meditation?
Yeah, I meditate you know, probably 5 days out of the week or so, you know, only like 5 to 10 minutes in the mornings when I'm outside, like, doing the Qigong and stuff, that I consider that a form of my meditation, that
Yeah.
body movement, breathing meditation. I'm not typically the person to like, prepare for my nightly routine, sit up on a pillow and just sit upright with my hands raised like that. Like, I don't find that to be very suitable for my type of meditation. Some people do really well with that. I like to go about it with either guided meditations. There's this app called Other Side that's pretty cool because they have all these different speakers on it. So there's all these different voices. So if you get dried out with certain voices, like that English speaking guy who's always, guiding you through the meditations, you can switch it up and have an Australian woman or something random. But in all honesty, like, it is kind of nice having that change up. So Other Side I heard was pretty cool, and I tried that once. I haven't done it like long term. I really like Brain FM. You guys familiar with this app?
No, I'm not.
Oh, it's so freaking cool. So they actually have a ton of randomized controlled trials on their specific binaural beats, which can support focus, meditation, sleep, calmness, or just relaxation. And they trigger these certain brain waves based on the frequency that's coming out. And they're all scientifically valid. They can go anywhere from 30 minutes to like 3-4 to 9 hours straight. And you can have them downloaded on your phone as well in the app. So if you're like flying on a plane, you can have access to it. But overall, Brain FM is one of my favorites in the world. Ben Greenfield actually did a podcast interview with the guy who created it. So if you're ever looking for something along those lines to delve deeper into it, Brain FM, Ben Greenfield, you can like look it up, podcast on that. But I've been doing that for a couple years, and I find it super helpful, to tap into the flow state. Like right now I'm using my noise canceling headphones, and I find them very helpful for getting into the meditations, because it can close out all that external sound, and it can really help me tap into it. Now, someone's probably thinking like, okay, what about electromagnetic frequencies? Because of course the Bluetooth and all that can be bouncing and zapping my brain. A lot of times I like to have, this is going down a segue for a second, but EMFs, if you guys aren't familiar, it's like very potent, 5G, Wi-Fi, all that stuff we're being zapped with on a daily basis. This is causing issues with fertility, cancer. It's just agitating to our cells because it's not like the normal frequencies coming from the earth. And so that's why grounding is also very important, going barefoot outside to kind of dissipate those that have built up in the body. But my point being, I bring this up because the headphones, if you are wearing over-ear headphones and they're Bluetooth, you can diminish the EMS by wearing this company called LAMS, Get LAMS. And it's really powerful, but it has silver lining technology within the fabric. And so it completely blocks out 99+% of the EMS. So I have a beanie that I typically wear under these, which is super epic. So you can put them over the beanie and you're not getting any EMS in your brain. But that being said, like overall, that goes back to energetics too, even just thinking about the power of energetics. But yeah, with meditation, going back to that real quick, full circle. Yeah, I like to do, anywhere from 5 to 10 minute morning meditations. I don't meditate as much in the evening. I like to just like breathe 4-7-8 breathing in my bed before I go to bed. Andrew Weil coined this. It's basically 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, and 8 seconds out. And it's extremely calming for the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's kind of the way I like to go about it.
Have you ever tried the holotropic breathing? Because I know that's something that I've done like a decent amount. I do that in the cold shower a lot of times, or like the ice bath. Like I was jumping in the ocean all winter, like basically like every week. I was going in February in New Jersey, January, going in every week, taking videos we were posting on YouTube, and I'd be doing the holotropic breathing. It kind of helps me like align my mind and get out of my body rather, and like not identify with it, if you know what I'm saying, not feel that pain and just kind of observe it from like a third person perspective. But also I find it helps if I'm meditating to do the quick like 30 nasal breaths. I'm sure you've seen like the like that
breath of fire type stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Have you messed around with any of that type of stuff?
Dude, I did an hour-long holotropic breath work, an hour. It was about 6 months ago, lying down on my back, and it was guided online. So I had like a live Zoom call with everyone, and we set up the camera because we actually signed a waiver in case we died or like passed out. So we set up the camera to where they can view us on the side, and I was lying down on my back, and they had all these trippy sounds. So I had my headphones on, and he was guiding us through and everything. But it's basically, all in through the mouth and all out through the mouth. And you're just for an hour of that. Like, it was insane. So I start getting crab or lobster arms, they call it. And you start, your arms start curling up. And basically it's all like somatic releases. Afterwards and kind of during it, I was crying, just relentlessly crying. And I didn't have any emotions or thoughts tied to it. It was just literally just crying. It was wild. Yes, that is probably the deepest state I've ever gone with a psychedelic journey on breath work alone and meditation, you could say. Insane, but it's so powerful doing that. However, with Wim Hof and stuff like that, of course, cold showers in the morning. I love my Wim Hof and kind of Tumo and the holotropic work. But I'm a big fan of a lot of just incorporating both, that kind of heavy sympathetic arousal stuff, and then also that calming stuff like the 4-7-8 or box breathing, which is 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds, 4 seconds. That's really helpful. So all these different breath works are powerful. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I breathwork is one of the things that really has driven this whole meditation thing for me, because I just kind of discovered, like, you take if you're having a bad time, you take 6 deep breaths and it just like fully aligns you back with whatever you're trying to be at that moment. And but the holotropic breathing, you did that, you said you did an hour. I haven't done a full hour, but I did like a very similar thing, like into the stomach, up into the chest, and then out like through the mouth. And I think I did it for like 45 minutes or something. I took a video of myself while I was doing it, because like I wanted to see if like my face started twitching or something.
Right.
And I got on video, my hands were going like that, and my face was like, I was like licking my lips, like I had no control of my facial muscles. I think I cried for like 2 minutes during it. Like, it was just like you said, like so powerful. Like, yeah, it's just
it's a release.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it just like releases all that energy.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's like weirdo stuff, and I think all the things we're talking about is weirdo stuff. But it also is so balancing. Be weird. That's another thing we get talk about, is like people need to own the weirdness. I think everyone is so weird deep down, but we're so insecure about expressing the weirdness. The more weird we are, the more free our minds are, right? It's like we put ourselves in chains by trying to be like so professional and all this stuff. Like, hey, I'm John. Hey, I'm Stu. Like just like shaking hands and that's it. It's like, no, let's like slap it together and give each other a big hug and say, what's up, bro? And maybe even hug for 2 minutes straight. That's another thing. People have awkward hugging strategies. It's like you hug for 5 seconds or less, and it's like, okay, anything over that gets awkward. But really, you start transmitting the oxytocin release and stuff like that after about a minute or two. So there's so many things that are going through my head right now, but we need to be more weird and expressive with our weirdness,
We lost that individuality.
I find that too, because like we like have been doing this 5D stuff and like trying to build our brand, and like we work at the beach, and like everyone is like starting to like know about it, and like they're like not even skeptical, but just like curious almost.
They ask questions,
and they like kind of do look at us like we're like some weirdos or whatever, but like we're the ones practicing the conscious lifestyle. They're all going out every night getting drunk, like doing whatever they want to do, but like the weird people are the ones that are like pushing this movement forward.
Yeah, the weird people are more connected to nature in many ways. You know?
Sure.
I think it's important for the human species, because technology just keeps evolving so rapidly, and I fall victim to it. We all do, when it comes to the stimulation and all the screens, and it's like, we're so up close, everything's so up close, but really just expanding that vision onward and outward is really so healing, and it brings out that weirdness, that inner weirdo. I think that's the biggest healer. It's a childlike energy, being goofy, being playful. Play is such a foundation to our livelihood, but like as we age, as I was saying, it kind of fades away, because we're expectations erupt, occupational stuff erupt, and we really lose touch with our true humanity.
No, for sure. I wanted to ask you one thing about, do you like fast? Do you practice fasting and stuff?
Oh yeah, fasting's a big thing of mine. I haven't done a long-term fast in about 5 months. It's been a long time. I've been trying to do a 3-day fast this upcoming summer, which will be nice. I think in the upcoming next couple of weeks, I'll be doing that. I'm big on daily intermittent fasting. I'm a huge fan of that, or throwing in a 24-hour fast every once in a while. I really enjoy that. I think the intention behind it is number one. So a lot of people are hopping into fasting and wanting to do it because they hear one thing about fat loss, but really they don't have the strategies down. And so there's a lot of ways that you need to start and break the fast in order to make it effective, And on top of that, just like the timing is everything. I don't think women do well over 12 hours. Once they start getting over 12 to 14 hours, they start having some hormonal issues. And that's the unfortunate part, is like everything is rampant saying everyone should intermittent fast. Everyone should. 14 to 16 hours. It's like, hold back here. All those studies we're seeing that on are of white 40-year-old men. They're not over women. And then we have a couple studies we see online that are of women, and they're actually having major hormonal imbalances because they have a 30-day cycle. Us men, we have a daily cycle. We don't have a 30-day cycle, monthly cycle. So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. But for the most part, men do really well with 14 to 18 hours a day. And I find myself doing really well just breaking my fast. Let's say around noon, I've been doing 12:31, having some black coffee. I still break it somewhat mid-morning because I like to put my butter in there and a little bit of MCT oil on occasion. But, for me, it still keeps me satiated. I'm still becoming a fat burning machine in the morning. But then I break the fast with a meal in the noon time. And then I, eat my last meal around 9 p.m. typically, and go to bed around 11 or 12. So I have that 2-hour kind of period before sleep, not eating, so I can have that deep sleep. And so that gives me around, 15 hours ish a day. So I'm a big fan of that. Yeah.
If you were preparing for like a 3-day fast, like you said, how would you prepare for it? Like, would you be eating certain meals or not eating certain meals, like in preparation for that? Because that's something that interests me, like seeing, if I'm not going to eat for 3 days, should I fill up on food before? Or should I let my body get used to having that unnourishing feeling, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it unfolds a lot of things. The big can of worms, because it just depends on your intention. Again, if your intention is to fast for 3 days, as a fat loss means, there's different ways you can start and end the fast. If your intention is more of a longevity means, then there's also a different way you can go about it. So personally, let's say if you want to go about the longevity part of it, you can actually they kind of coincide together. So I'll state like what I personally think is best for most people. Just one setup. And basically the day before and the day after, try to go maybe keto-ish. Like, just don't have any like carbs really. That will make it easier for your insulin to drop. Your blood sugar will drop, so you don't have cravings as much during the 3 days of fasting without any food, any calories. And so I'm a big fan of just having like the day before, it could be some light foods that are easily digestible. So staying away from foods like FODMAPs, they're called, which are found in like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, those types of things. Raw foods like that can be rough on the stomach. You probably can experience that yourself, having those ranch dips and chowing down on cauliflower and broccoli. And then you're like, shit, I'm farting my brains out. That's because your body's having a tough time breaking that down. So, going easy on steamed vegetables and fruit, some good high fat, high protein meals, but for the most part, lower calorie, hypocaloric. That will help you tap into the reservoirs of the fat loss, and also making it easier to adapt to the 3 days. So, it could be wild caught salmon, could be some lemon on top, some olive oil for maybe the dinner time before you start breaking the fast the next morning. Bone broth. I'm a huge fan of bone broth. So loading up on bone broth the day before and after is a great way to go about it. You can have a whole quart of it if you like. You can cook the bone broth with, or if you just get it from a carton, you can cook it on the stovetop with some ginger, some turmeric, some anti-inflammatories like that. You can have some berries the day before. You can even have sweet potatoes if you want and stuff like that. But I'm just a bigger fan of just sticking more fully keto, no insulin spikes whatsoever. So that's a good way to go about it. I'm not a huge fan of like nuts and seeds and anything that could be potentially inflammatory. Just really throw it out the window, because then you're going to have that inflammation persisting during the fast for 2 to 3 days after you have that inflammatory food. And that's not going to help you, right? That's not going to help out with you tapping into autophagy, which is basically your cellular cleanup crew. And so if you raise autophagy up through fasting, it goes down a little bit, and you won't have as effective autophagy if you're having inflammatory foods. So overall, very anti-inflammatory foods for the most part. Stay away from like a lot of dairy, stay away from wheats, grains, things like that for the most part, and just eat things that will be very suitable for most people before and after the fast.
How do you feel like if you were on a 3-day fast? How do you feel? Does that hunger sensation subside eventually, and you sort of get into like a different type of state with it, or is it kind of just like a fight against the hunger the whole time? Or how how does that affect your body in like a mental state, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it is kind of an up and down roller coaster where some, like, even day one, you're like, oh, I'm getting hungry. And then it goes away after 15 minutes. It's really interesting. You drink water, you have some electrolytes or salt, whatever, and it goes away right away.
Mhm.
So whenever you get hungry or you have those just spirals of just like hunger, not hungry, hunger, not hungry, just drink a ton of water, have some sea salt in it, maybe even put some apple cider vinegar. And that's a good way to go about it and boosting the metabolism, helping you stay full. Most people say the same thing. It kind of comes in waves, right? The hunger and the cravings, for instance.
That's interesting. That's something I do want to get into. I haven't gotten into it yet. I've been trying to keep this weight up of mine while I'm playing football still. And
Yeah, I hear that, man. But just remember, if you take 3 days off, it's not going to lead to any you're not going to lose any muscle, or you might just only lose fat, as long as you're doing it right. So, most people like have this fear, not saying you do, but most people have this fear that over, fasting 3 days, oh, I'm going to lose all my gains or my strength gains and all that. It's like, you will for that week because you're going to go through a little adaptation, but you'll bounce right back and you might actually have more muscle mass and lean muscle mass because you've gotten rid of some inflammation. So now your body's protecting muscle, which is even more important. So it's really interesting, the physiology of what goes on when you fast. So I encourage people to experiment and try it out. Start small though, start with intermittent fasting, work your way up to 24 hours, work your way up to 36, etc.
What would it be like what's your go-to like breaking fast meal? Like, do you have like a usual meal you always go to, or does it differ on like what kind of fast you're doing at the time?
I usually just drink bone broth. I'll drink some bone broth to kind of get the stomach right because it's loaded up with collagen. It's really good for the gut lining. It's very light and you feel kind of energized afterwards. Chock full of protein, healthy protein as well. Proline, glycine, those kind of things, which is calming on the nervous system. Glycine specifically, proline and valine, those are good amino acids for rebuilding your skin and your gut lining. So bone broth, I'm a big fan of. And then maybe after that, I'll have some like salmon, some wild caught salmon, like I mentioned, lemon, sardines. Fish tends to be a little bit, as you guys can like feel when you eat fish, how it's like softer versus like a steak. Steak is pretty rough. It's a little bit harder to break down steak versus, or like beef and chicken versus like fish. Fish tends to be a little bit easier to break down. So I'm a big fan of fish, and then maybe some steamed greens, possibly. I always recommend steaming because it makes it easier to digest as well. So that's kind of like a little routine right there. Olive oil loaded on top.
Yeah, that's cool stuff.
I
That's
gotta
good
start
stuff.
incorporating this into my life.
Yeah,
now.
I know. I just talking to you is getting me so like into like why haven't I started doing this stuff like all of it yet? Like I've incorporated kind of like the healthy eating and stuff. Not fell out of it completely. Like I still eat pretty healthy, but it's more like I've just been trying to eat as much as I can right now. Just keeping up the gains, I guess.
Yeah,
What
brother.
my mentality is, but like I feel like I need to break that and start to dive into all this ancient knowledge that we have and we have access to. I had one question. You were talking about the Sanskrit text before, the Ayurveda, and you talked about like the bodily kind of ideas behind it. But is there any like spiritual disciplines or spiritual ideas that you got from that text or other texts like that you've read?
Yoga originates from Ayurveda, which is crazy. So in yoga itself, people think it's just a movement exercise type thing. Oh, like do your yoga, you'll feel, more stretching and stuff like and better in your body, which is great. Yes, it is. But yoga is also a way of life. It's the way you treat yourself. It's the way you treat others. And it's just showing respect for everything and everyone around you. And so yoga is integrated into Ayurveda quite a bit, and just different meditation philosophies in general. I'm not too keen on the depths of that stuff, but I do know that there is a lot of things you can unfold with overall spirituality and, just unpacking a lot with Ayurveda with that. I mean, it's really profound stuff because, I mean, it took them centuries to figure this out, and it wasn't just like an overnight thing. Like, we just started figuring out, for instance, the microbiome less than 20 years ago. Well, this Ayurveda stuff has been ingrained into our deep human survival for 5,000 plus years. So there's a lot of things, but I'm not 100% keen on the spirituality. I know there's a lot of things you could look up though and just get super interested in.
Yeah, for sure. What would be like your best your best meal that you would always go to, like what do you incorporate in your meals?
Well, let's talk about smoothies. I love smoothies. I eat smoothies pretty often. Like 3-4 days out of the week, I have a good protein packed smoothie. Either a whey isolate from a grass-fed source. That's awesome. No harmful sweeteners and stuff. And then I'll also interchange that between a plant-based source, which has like pumpkin protein, a little bit of pea protein, a hemp protein in it. That's pretty awesome. And so typically those are flavored, vanilla or chocolate or whatever. So I'll have that as the base, which gives me that protein, of course, 20 to 40 grams usually. And then I'll just load up a bunch of goodies in there, anti-inflammatories, like I've mentioned before, turmeric, ginger. I'll throw in blueberries. I'll throw in spirulina and chlorella, basically these nutrient dense greens that are just, there's these algae that are derived from like typically either California or Hawaii. And they're just like, it's basically like a seaweed in a way. It's like an algae, and they grind it up into this fine powder, and it's just chock full of the most nutrient dense stuff. And it's really good for binding, chlorella specifically to heavy metals and toxins in the body. And it's really powerful at cleaning the blood. So I load those up a lot. Like those greens are powerful. And then I'll, load up some different types of fibers, like acacia fiber that helps feed a lot of good gut bugs. So soaked chia seeds are awesome. Pumpkin seeds I'll throw in there. Brazil nuts. I go crazy. I just load avocado. I almost forgot. Avocado is my shit for every smoothie. Avocado. Dude, put in the smoothie though. It makes it all creamy like pudding. It's crazy.
That's good.
So yeah, that's kind of like one of my favorite all-time meals in quotations is a good smoothie like that.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. I love it.
One last thing I got for you. What would be like, what's your workout regimen? I know you work out like 3 times a week. You do the Qigong, you do all the movement and stuff, but like, what's your like go-to like lifts and stuff?
Yeah. So
like weird lifts or anything?
Weird lifts. Yes. Let's talk about weird lifts. We like weird lifts too. We went all into that. Well, I'll start off with the basics. I mean, every workout 3 days a week, it's usually like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So a day in between of rest that allows me to kind of recoup and revitalize doing the things like Qigong and stuff we mentioned. And I like to stick to compound lifts, get some sort of endurance working. I love to box as kind of a way to kind of get endurance up. I have one of those Bob guys that are just like these ugly tan dudes that you box, and just do that for 10 to 15 minutes to warm up, get the blood pumping, feel a little bit more energized. You can go on a run, anything along those lines is great. That's what I like to do. And then I get into the workout, and I start off with warm-ups, of course, for every one of these lifts, but usually around like 3 sets per compound lifts. So if I'm doing like legs, for instance, as priority, I'll do Bulgarian split squats. That's a very powerful movement right there. You prop the leg up on the bench, and then you get kind of a lunge position with it. Super powerful right there. One of my favorite leg day movements of all time. Lunges, walking lunges, throw in. I don't really do heavy squats anymore. I found when I did them quite a bit repeatedly, it created some imbalance because I wasn't doing it right. And so I actually tore my meniscus last year. And so rehab that. I'm way better now, but I've been focusing on more functional movement now, which is the weird stuff in a way. Doing all sorts of lateral training. So kind of side squats, which are also called Cossack squats. Those are powerful. So you kind of lean side to side. It's like lunging side to side in a way versus forward and back. That is really powerful. So a lot of lateral movements, right? Because in this day and age, we're so fixated on walking forward, walking backwards in a sense. We're in sagittal and frontal planes all the time, squatting, deadlifting. We're always just in this foot facing forward type vibe. Instead, we need to start facing hip to hip, ear to ear type idea, right? Because it's like that. We're complex humans, so we need to start integrating more of these movements that can work in these different planes. The transverse plane is the rotational plane. So like wood chops are a very powerful weirdo movement in a sense. Really getting that rotation with cables and like bands and things. So that's kind of the split overall. It's like, okay, like 3 days a week, like I was saying with the legs, 3 compound lifts, like kind of the ones I mentioned, then maybe throw in some like isolated movements. So compound being more than one muscle group, and then isolated movements being like, okay, I just want to prioritize the quads, so I'll do some sissy squats, for instance. Those are pretty cool. Those burn out the quads. You guys can look all this stuff up. I'll do some calf raises. I'll prioritize the calves if I want to focus on that. So The same goes for like push and pull in a sense, right? 3 compound lifts. It could be incline bench press. It could be dips. It could be something along those lines. And then you throw in at the end, maybe some cable crossovers, right? To work the pecs. Or you can work maybe even just some push-ups or some tricep extensions. So that's kind of the good way to go about it right there. I find it very effective for most men, at least, to put on muscle.
Are you doing full body workouts typically in all of your lifts, or are you doing focusing on upper body or leg days primarily?
I put like 75% emphasis on muscle groups that I want to prioritize, and then I put 25% on like legs with my push day or whatever. So I'll throw in like Bulgarian split squats with my prioritization of upper body pecs or shoulders. And so that works well for me. I really like full body days though, because you get that full pump in.
Are you familiar with Ben Patrick?
Yeah, knees over toes, dude.
Yeah, knees over toes guy.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of his stuff because I've always had a problem with my one knee specifically. I've been doing a lot of his I don't know if you know about TKEs, where you have the band behind your knee and you're kind of doing one-legged squats, like pistol squats almost with a band behind the knee, like the leaning up on the wall. And honestly, it has helped strengthen like those muscles, like in the knee, like in here. I don't know exactly what they're called, but I've just felt like a whole lot more stable, like running especially, or like walking around and stuff. I've been trying to run barefoot. I know that's something I see you be doing.
Oh yeah.
Running barefoot. I feel like it puts a different mindset on you because you're just feeling each step. It's just completely different than running with shoes on.
100%. Yeah, you can feel the contours of the ground. Your toes begin to separate. You become lighter on your feet, so you're not just pounding down, relying on the shoe for cushioning, right? So you become much more in tune with your feet. And we have all these different meridian points on the bottom of our feet, going back to energetics. So if we're not stimulating those areas, we're actually getting stagnant energy built up from the feet up. And so then we start having issues with our ankles, our knees, our hips. So it's really good to be in tune from the ground up by getting that constant stimulation, grounding, right? Walking on sharp rocks, like as shitty as it sounds, just like go on a hike barefoot. As you know, it actually feels amazing afterwards. You'll be like, wow, I just had acupuncture done like on my feet. So it's pretty cool.
That's incredible. We did a couple barefoot hikes last year leading up into the fall. We got to start doing it on. Yeah, no, they're awesome. You just feel like super, I don't even know the word, like animalistic, connected in nature. Like when you're just walking through the woods, like you feel like you're not separate from it anymore. Cause I feel like we kind of got separated from nature in a sense. You go out there barefoot and you're like, oh my God, I'm right back where I came from.
Reconnected, baby. Yeah. And I mean, just a quick plug in right there. Just like our shoes are kind of foot binding, modern foot binding, right? Our toes aren't separated, and we're having like, I used to wear Vans all the time, dude, like just all throughout my life. And I come to realize like, wow, my toe bed has been crunched in for quite some time. So now my pinky toes kind of overlapping, all the other toes in a sense. And, energetically, we have different nerves that go through the toes too. So that's sending mixed signals and maybe even a fight or flight response to the body. So getting that gripping down with the toes, working out barefoot, that's one of my biggest proponents ever. Wearing barefoot shoes is a good way to do it in this modern era. Vivo barefoot, I love. Overall, just trying to go barefoot, right? It's so powerful, like you mentioned.
Connecting to that electromagnetic frequency.
Connected, baby.
Connected, grounded. No, that's what it's all about.
It's like Liver King. Connected, grounded, anchored into the earth.
Awesome. It was awesome. Just trying to find our way in this infinite world, this infinite universe. And unfortunately, there's one thing that isn't infinite, and it's time on this podcast. And we appreciate having you. It's been a great time. So much love. Appreciate we finally got to connect. That's awesome.
We got to connect
again. Yeah, we got to connect again. It'll be good. Very informational. And as always, to all the viewers, check out the new 5D merch that dropped. We'll get you a shirt one of these days. We'll send you one of those out. We're gonna start pushing the clothing, TikTok, Instagram, it all. We'll clip this up. We'll send it on over to you, and we'll be connecting communities.
I love it. Let's get it going.
Yes, indeed. Sir. Awesome. Appreciate having you on, brother.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much. It's been
Thank
awesome.
you.
Gotta do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Peace out.